Hello and welcome to What's Your Random Podcast. My name is Kev Duffy and I am your host. And today I was joined by guest Don Nguyen, who was here to promote Danger Arcade, a comic book arcade full of exciting stories of danger. This is a project out of the Comic Bug Shop in Manhattan Beach, California, and a meetup group there, a creative meetup group there called the Sketchy Bug Group. This is a compilation of many artists' work into this one volume, and it just has a few more hours left on Kickstarter. So go ahead and check it out, and then join me back here for my conversation with Don Nguyen, one of the contributors. It was a great conversation. He gave insight into the comic book industry from an indie perspective. He has his own individual projects like Pablo the Gorilla. We talked about that. And anyway, I'll skip the summary. Just listen to the episode and enjoy. Without further ado, a random conversation with Don Nguyen. Before we jump into the episode, I want to take time to thank our sponsors. That's you folks who are listening to this pilot season of What's Your Random 2020. Recently created the objective of targeting 20 episodes within 2020. Very doable, and we're well on our way. We already have almost 10 guests scheduled, and I thank them all for joining me as I work out the kinks and take feedback from our growing audience to determine how we could improve the podcast. This is my creative endeavor, one of my creative endeavors, and through the process, I want to be a little bit transparent, be a little bit vulnerable, and put myself out there and talk about how I want to improve the podcast moving forward and take constructive feedback from people who are listening. So if you're listening and you have some ideas on how we could improve the show, give us that feedback. And like I said, you are our sponsors right now. So give us a hopefully positive rating, but an honest rating on iTunes. You can also listen to us and watch us on YouTube. Just search What's Your Random and you'll find us. I'll start appending at the end of each episode some notes that I have from the episode, how I felt about the interview itself, and some things I thought I could do to learn from the experience with that guest and improve future episodes, realizing that this is a creative endeavor and I'm learning every time I get on this microphone with you all. So give us your feedback and let us know what you think. And now, finally, without further ado, my awesome interview with Don Nguyen. Or do you prefer just doing it as it is?
This is usually the best option for me.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm hoping to buy a little bit more equipment. I don't really stream that often on Twitch, but I've been told I should get a mic.
And they're so affordable now, it's hard not to,
Yeah.
I would say it's pretty easy to justify if you do any of this sort of thing.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm just not consistent with it because I know part of like doing Twitch or YouTube is like you got to show up at the same time, and I'm just randomly on. Like I'll just pop in and be like, all right, I'm gonna sketch for the next 2 hours, or like ink this piece or work on this page.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you have one night a week where even if you don't do it at the same exact time, if you do it, Friday nights starting between 11 p.m. and 2 a.m. Then people, because I think for me, when I've watched, and I don't watch all that many sketchers, but when I have, it's been pretty random for me that I just encounter their account and I see that they're live now.
Okay.
And then I follow them. And if it so happens that I go on YouTube and they're live again, I'm subscribed and I could join back where I left off, so to speak. But
yeah, I think that should be my New Year's resolution, is to become a little more consistent on that aspect.
Yeah. So welcome to What's Your Random. This is pretty much it.
All right.
I'm the host, Kevin Duffy, and it's a little project I started just as a fan of, everybody's a fan of media and culture and some form of art, be it movies, comics, you know, paintings, illustration, music, you could go on forever.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to connect with people about their creative endeavors, their creative process, their inspiration. And I happened across a Kickstarter that you're currently running. And I guess through the course of this conversation, I'll be able to get a little bit more understanding of the layers of all the people and players you have involved in this project.
Okay.
But I happened upon, and I'll read the byline from Kickstarter, which is how I found you: a comic book arcade full of exciting stories of danger by the Comic Bug Inc.
Yes.
So I'll turn the mic over to you. You can introduce yourself and the project, and then we could just have a good conversation. Welcome, Don.
Thank you very much for having me on, Kevin. I appreciate the time. My name is Don Nguyen. A lot of people know me by winning it online, almost on all social media. I just recently got that trademarked, so that is now my official business moniker that I'll go
And
by.
so now you could really promote it
Yes, I
without
can
fear
really
of it being stolen.
Yeah. So my last name is Vietnamese. It's spelled Nguyen, but it's pronounced win, like win a ball game. You add an ing to that, it, and you'll find me. I am part of a creator collective group that makes comics based out of a store in Manhattan Beach, California called The Comic Bug. They have 2 store locations. My local store actually just happens to be in Culver City. But I got to know that they had a creator group, and I wanted to join because I make comics, and I was just starting to get into comics. And they're a fantastic mix of both veterans and noobs. And I got into it a couple of years ago, so kind of like midway into trying to break into comics for me. But yeah, they've been around since, I believe, 2012. The group was founded by Don Walker, the store's co-owner, Mike Wellman, and a few other people, as I understand it. Mike has since left the group and formed another store, but the group is still going strong, and they just recently, this month, today and tomorrow is actually the last 20 hours or so of the campaign. But in October, we launched a comic book anthology, and thankfully, we became one of 100 projects that was backed by Boom Studios, which is amazing. I don't even know how they found us, but that was incredible. And we're also a Kickstarter project we love. The book has 10 stories by 21 creators, and it features talent like Brandon Easton, who people may know from IDW's Transformers. He just did 2 episodes on Netflix, Transformers War for Cybertron. He's currently doing False Witness for Judge Dredd. The man is prolific, and he writes amazing stories. He's done a Marvel title recently. It was Marvel Action Spider-Man. And then our cover is done by the wonderful Mike Penn, who normally does his artwork for Heavy Metal Magazine. So I don't know how he even scored that, but he's friends with Don Walker. Like I said, Don Walker is a veteran. He's been in the industry quite a while. A lot of people, especially on the West Coast, know him. He does Agent Wild. He's successfully ran, I believe, 2 or 3 Kickstarters at this point. So he's teamed up with the store. He's the guy that we look up to, and he's spearheading the campaign for it. And we're proud of the stories we put together. It's a little bit of a mix for everybody, I believe. There's stuff that looks, like big pub style work. There's indie style work, and there's even like underground zine style work. So yeah, that's 69 pages of story, plus I believe there's going to be about 10, 12 pinups in there too.
Awesome. And those 3 kind of subsets of genre, how would you define them for somebody who is kind of new to comic books or doesn't know that much? Zine style and indie style, and the first one you referred to, I lost it already.
So big pub is big publisher style, which is, when you walk into any comic book store and you see a comic book, that's immediately what you think of. So it's going to be like your Batman style, like whatever the house style is for DC or for Marvel, with like X-Men or Spider-Man. obviously we have creators of that caliber. I actually just finished a set of trading cards for Marvel. I just did Marvel anime sketch cards. So I just joined the
Awesome.
Marvel Upper Deck family, which is pretty incredible. And then, you have zines. For those who aren't familiar with zines, they come out of a punk do-it-yourself DIY ethos, which is people just put together these little books that are generally photocopied, and they feature cartoons, comics, poetry, stories, like whatever it is, just all mashed together. And so we have a few people of that milieu, that background.
And so is the format borrowing on that multimedia approach and bringing it to comics, or it's comics that were imported from the zine ethos and culture?
Well, we have those creators within our motley crew, if you will, and so they're bringing their style to the book. Underground comics is like the hate Ashbury movement. So when people think underground, they think like R. Crumb, the stuff that came out of San Francisco in the 70s, even some of the stuff from the 80s, like black and white comics that you don't see in the mainstream, that deal with topics from sexuality to politics, even slice of life stuff, whatever you may have. And then the indie stuff, I'm an indie guy. I'm starting out trying to break into the industry to get some recognition. But like where my bread and butter is the crowd that just shows up to conventions and looks for titles that you don't normally see from big publishers like DC or Marvel or IDW or Boom Studios. It's just people out there who have stories to tell. They're trying to do it on their own.
And I think at this point we should mention Pablo the Gorilla, which is your project, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, Pablo the Gorilla is my very own creator comic. It funded last year on Kickstarter. I was thankful for that. Had a lot of wonderful people come on board to support it, including I have a variant covered by two-time Eisner winner Dustin Nguyen. And the Eisner is sort of like the Oscar of the comic book industry. And when he came over and said he would do a cover for me, I couldn't believe it. I was like, I'm sorry, what? But I got to know him because I don't know how, but I think it's because we have the same last name and the same first initial. And people would and they still do, they keep showing up to my table at conventions thinking I'm him.
I guess that's convenient maybe for marketing purposes.
They'll bring Batman comics or detective comics that he's worked on, and I'm like, I know the guy you're looking for. And if that ever happens to you, you're at a convention and you find me and you're looking for Dustin Nguyen, I will gladly escort you over to Dustin. He's one of the most amazing and nicest creators on the face of the earth. Like, I love the guy.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I really didn't know in scheduling this interview that you had that successful Kickstarter project for Pablo the Gorilla, and jumping on this call, I quickly ran through some of the sketch art and I was blown away. I think it's really cool. And
I appreciate that.
I would certainly be in your target audience, so to speak.
Great to hear. Yeah, I mean, I love comic books. I grew up with them ever since I was a little kid. And so I also grew up in that time where Ninja Turtles blew up.
Yeah, so we're in the same general generation for sure.
And then I love cyborg things. Like, I also grew up loving Terminator movies. I love gorillas. That was like a big thing with studying primates in school, and I love genetics. So that all came together in this idea. And I'm not the first person to do a cyborg gorilla in a comic, obviously, but I think Pablo the Gorilla offers some fun in terms of it's a very fast-paced comic, and it's about a cyborg gorilla that delivers pizza.
Right. So pizza might be the differentiator among cyborg gorillas out there. I like that. And one of my questions actually, I don't prepare too many questions, but one of the ones I did prepare was, how did you arrive at those three elements? You kind of maybe touched on it already just now, but what was the genesis behind gorilla, pizza, cyborg, and how do you turn those three elements into a story?
If you pick up Pablo the Gorilla, in the back of it, I actually have as bonus pages how it came to be. So for me, I used to tag gorillas around the town. I would put stickers up and stuff too of gorillas because, like I said, I love primates. yeah, I like the idea that we are just so close to them genetically, and I find that very fascinating. I think for gorillas, we're within, I want to say it was a 12 or 16% genetic difference. Chimpanzees is like 1 to 3%, if I'm not mistaken. So I've always been fascinated by primates, and the idea of a gorilla was just like throwing its poop everywhere, if you will, just like get it up. So it's that idea of this is very similar to just what do you do in graffiti, right? Like tagging or throwing up pieces is to get that recognition. So he started out as a little tag, and then I was like, oh, this would make a great comic. Like, where could I take it from there? And I thought, wouldn't it be funny if it was a cyborg gorilla? So it's a gorilla that's equipped with all this equipment, and it could be used for a weapon. And the only thing he wants to do is just live life and deliver pizzas.
So he doesn't even want to make use of the weapons that
he doesn't want to make use of the weapons
at his disposal.
He just wants to live his life, have a job, work 9 to 5, if you will. But unfortunately, the government that created him wants their equipment back, and he's also being hunted by something a little more sinister and protean at the same time. And that's where the first issue comes off. And I'm working on the second issue right now.
Reluctant fight for survival.
Yeah, it's a reluctant fight for survival. Yeah. And then Ed Duchscher, who's actually doing lettering on some of the Danger Arcade stories, he puts out a digital webbing comic, which is almost like an anthology, and I have a 2-pager coming up in that when his book comes out.
Is that with Pablo?
Or? Yeah, that'll be for Pablo, yeah.
Okay.
But in terms of the Danger Arcade, my story in that is with my friend Mike Corpy, and it's something completely different. We've been trying to get into as many anthologies and get as much of his work published as possible. So I'm actually on a lot of the anthologies from October until now.
Very cool. And for the current anthology, you are just penning it, or?
I do the art, and then Mike is the writer that I work with, so he writes the stories.
Got it.
And there are other teams, like Don's piece, for example. He's the penciler, but he has an inker and a colorist. And then obviously Ed Duchscher, I believe, is doing the letters for him as well. So Ed will be doing a few of the stories. And for those who don't know who Ed Duchscher is, he letters for Boom Studios. He's primarily known right now, I think, for Mighty Morphin Power Rangers.
The current comic?
Yeah, the current comic.
Yeah, okay, gotcha. Yeah, just to give a little background, my comic recollection is a little bit rusty. I used to be a collector back in the day and did a lot of G.I. Joe collecting.
Nice.
But those times have faded, so my understanding of who's in the game from the illustration standpoint and writing standpoint is rusty. And I was never good with names, so yeah. I appreciate the way that you're introducing both comics and the players to the audience who might be listening.
Well, I'm glad. And colorists and letterists are underappreciated, so if I can get some shine for Ed's super well known. Everybody knows.
Yeah, so maybe walk through, because it seems like in comics, people could wear one of many hats, and sometimes they wear multiple. So, yes. What is the breakdown? And then if there is a specific couple of hats that people typically wear, which would they be? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I definitely get it. So a lot of people who aren't familiar with comics might not know that the big publishers usually deal with assembly line style of comics, which is you have a penciler come in to draw the comic that a writer writes. So sometimes there are two completely different people. Sometimes they can be the same person, but usually it goes, writer writes a story, a penciler pencils the story, and inker comes in and inks over the pencils to add depth and detail to it, and then a colorist comes in to color that, and then a letter comes in to add all the speech afterwards or during. And any of the pieces can shift and move, but by the end of whatever the time frame is to get the book out, all those pieces will come together to produce hopefully a fantastic book for everybody out there to read. And then usually, if you're an indie person, you wear all the hats.
Yeah, that's what I was interested in. Yeah,
so,
for sure.
For example, on Pablo the Gorilla, I did pretty much everything. I did the comic Marvel styles, which means that I basically just did kind of a plot outline. So I knew what the story would be in my head, and then I just drew it out. And then I went through, inked it, colored it, and lettered it myself. And with each passing thing that I do, I hope to build upon that. And then there are people, even in indie, you can split it up. If it's easier for you to farm out the rest of the task, you want to look for a good inker, a good colorist, and then a writer that you enjoy working with. So yeah, those are basically the divisions of it. But usually when you see independent people or like zine people, they do it all themselves.
And if you could have it your way, at the end of the day, I guess, which would you do, if not all of them?
If I could have my way, I would just do pencils.
Okay.
That probably brings me the biggest joy, because it all of it is problem solving. And I wouldn't discredit anybody. Like, there's so much admiration to be had at each level. You look at colorists. If you have a bad colorist, they don't do a good job of bringing the pages to life. If you have a bad letter, they don't do a good job of moving a reader's eye around the page and having them follow the story completely. Obviously, if you don't have a good writer or a good story, then you're kind of nowhere, and nobody wants to read the story, because the saying always goes, you could have mediocre art but a fantastic story, and people will still want to read the fantastic story.
And then, how much of the composition is dictated by the writer as opposed to the pencilist?
It's a tough call in comics. They always say that the artist does the majority of the grunt work, because in comics it's about the sequential nature of the story. So you want to have a good artist that can convey what's happening without ever having to put down the words. So you should be able just to look at a comic book page and go, oh, I kind of get what's going on here, and be able to flip through it. But then you want the depth of the words, so you want to be able to look at the page and go, I wonder what they're talking about or what they're saying. So, it really is one of those mediums that's all about the layers. And it's fantastic when you get something that comes together perfectly. It doesn't always happen, but every now and then you get some fantastic books out there.
I think that's the case with any collaboration, for sure.
Yeah. And, for example, I was talking to you about Dustin Nguyen, who did the variant cover for Pablo the Gorilla. He's on a book, Descender and Ascender, which is his co-creation with Jeff Lemire. And Jeff Lemire is an amazing writer. He's had tons of titles under his belt. But if you read that story, the amalgamation of their work is just beautiful. I've been trying to pitch it to people who don't know much about comics and are trying to get into comics, as it's, if you're familiar with like old school cartoons, it's like Johnny Quest. It's like AI, or Blade Runner. Actually, it pretty much is Johnny Quest meets Blade Runner is the best way to put the story. And then I haven't had a chance to read Ascender yet, but I think it goes a little more into the mystical aspect of the story that they're telling. But yeah, it's a fantastic book. It's out on by Image Comics, so if you get a chance, please pick it up and check it out.
Awesome. Very cool. So how did you, one of the things that also struck me about your project, your current project, is the scope and the amount of people who are involved. So do you know how the group got started and how it is managed over the course of years? Was the jumping point the Comic Bug shop itself, or?
I think, what it was back in the day, they would bring in creators, and they still do, unfortunately not during the pandemic, but they would bring in industry professionals to give talks. And, a lot of the same people kept showing up, and it naturally progressed from there, where people were like, hey, we want to learn how to make comics. These guys come to talk to us about it. And I see you like what if we just got together and put this group together? And I think that's what Don Walker and Mike and a couple other people, I think John Stanley Urchek is one of those guys. They came together and formed the group. And the group is everybody who's interested in comics. If you want to make comics, if you just love comics, if you're into cosplay, we have all sorts of people. So sometimes people just come to hang out, while others are there working. And usually you know, during non-pandemic times, we would meet Wednesdays from 5 to 8:30ish, 9ish at the Manhattan Beach store. And this is, I believe, I want to say it's like the fourth or fifth anthology they've done, but the very first time they've ever been on Kickstarter.
Okay. Cool. And I'm sorry, did you say how long the collective is referring it to a collective appropriate terminology?
I believe so. I mean, I think that's what
Okay.
they call themselves. Yeah, a team, a collective,
A team.
a group,
Okay.
a group of
Yeah.
collaborators.
Are
But
they, how long has it been around?
it's been
You
around
know,
since 2012, is my
2012.
understanding.
Okay.
And the only reason I know that is because I saw the logo that I've been posting everywhere to advertise for Danger Arcade, which says since 2012. So they've been around for a while. They have a few anthologies out already, one of which, I believe their last one had a cover by Scott Koblish, who worked on Deadpool. So
Oh,
that's
awesome.
amazing. So he's a friend of the shop, and he shows up every now and then. But yeah, they've been around for a while, and there's a mix. And if you're in California and you show up to a lot of conventions out here, you'll see a lot of faces that are members or know are members.
Yeah, that's awesome. And when it comes to putting it all together, obviously you have individual parts moving for each individual project, but when you come to bring them together, what's the negotiation that goes on? In terms of like ordering the books within the anthology, and things of that nature. And I don't know if there's like stuff that was left out just because it couldn't make it into this anthology that might be included in the next one. So if you could speak to that collaborative process about bringing it all together, that would be great.
Okay. I wasn't privy to the previous anthologies because I wasn't there for that part. But for this one, we've had people come and go. But at one point, I want to say maybe a year and a half ago, they had put out a call for stories. And the idea was that we put together an anthology that revolved around sort of a doomsday theme. But because the pandemic hit and not all the stories necessarily were post-apocalyptic or nihilistic, if you will, we decided that the general connecting thread would be the theme of danger or daring. And then the idea of using the word arcade for Danger Arcade was a little bit of video games, but also the fact that an arcade could be like a gallery of shops, like in a strip mall
Right.
kind of
Yeah.
an idea,
Yeah.
or setting like a promenade. So we thought, it's basically to showcase our creators within the group that are putting out their artwork, their stories, and that's how we came up with that. But for this particular project, we're really doing it sort of more to showcase the creators and the shop as well, just to show that the shop, it's been around, I think they've been around for 15 years now, I want to say, and they've been a huge factor in the Southern California comic book community, especially in terms of supporting independent comic book voices. And they have signings all the time with fantastic creators. Are you getting back into comics? Do you know a lot about what's going on in comics right
So
now?
I speak Japanese pretty well, and I read a decent amount of Japanese comics, old and new. Most recently, I'm interested in like older vintage anime, mecha
Oh,
anime.
wow. Okay.
So I have a pretty specific interest, but I do have general knowledge about comics. But I actually spoke to the creator of Slowpokes, which was a Kickstarter that was just
Yeah.
successfully funded, and I read that and I was thinking, man, it was really great. So far, it's great talking to you. It was great talking to him. There are so many artists out there, and just by virtue of looking for people who are, have a project and are doing something creative and trying to take something from an idea onto paper.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to be speaking with a lot of comic book artists from here on out. So I think I might get back into it just by virtue of having these sorts of conversations. Cause you piqued my interest already about various projects.
That's fantastic. Yeah. We live in a really interesting time. Like, as a person who has always wanted to be a part of comics, and it's funny because I actually only got into comics maybe about I want to say I wanted to head into this path about 8 years ago, and I was working up to it, and then I only really entered maybe about 4-5 years ago, seriously. um, I feel like indie comics are having a surge right now because of platforms, crowdfunding platforms like Kickstarter, like Indiegogo, and that opportunity was never available to us before. Like the price of putting together a project like this, to just an average person, if you think about it, is really astronomical. But to know that there are people out there who support the arts or are looking for new stories that aren't just like Superman, Batman, Spider-Man, X-Men. They're looking for something outside of the normal box of how you think of comics in terms of the general population or the lay population. It's really heartwarming that to know that people are doing that, even in these crazy times that we're in right now. To go, there are people out there that want to see new projects. They may be stuck at home with not a lot of mediums to view other than like a Netflix or Hulu situation. And they like reading, and they're looking for new outlets and new projects. So to have that opportunity in this day and age is incredible. And I think we're kind of in almost a golden age or a renaissance of that, if you will, especially for comics.
That's awesome. That gives me hope for the future. I guess my next question, kind of building off of that, is there a doomsday scenario in the near future where larger comic companies try to co-opt or silence the indie voices? Just thinking about Spotify, for example.
Yeah.
And I'm not too knowledgeable about it, but I know that there are people out there who wouldn't support Spotify because they think the algorithms select specifically for specific artists, and maybe although it provides opportunity and more opportunity to more people, it also leaves some people by the wayside. So is there anything like that that's going on in the world of comics as a medium for communicating?
I think with everything that's happening on the internet, you could always bring that into play. The music industry is just so much different than comics, I feel like, which is funny because it operates in a similar fashion in that a lot of bands, when bands start out, they're just indie bands, right? They're just your local garage band, your local bar band, and they're just working gigs, trying to get some shine, some recognition, and build a following. And at some point, like an A&R person comes in and is like, I like you. Would you like to sign? But again, with the internet, you see acts that just transcend the A&R, like transcend big labels like Sony or A&M or like whatever record labels are out there, and they've done it on their own. And so sure, the algorithm might be against you, but I feel like if you build enough of a following and a fervor for what you're doing, and what you're doing is good, and you're putting it out there and people enjoy it and they come back to consume it, then you're building your audience. And for comic books, it's more so like that, because all the indies it's the proving ground, it's the lab, if you will, where these ideas incubate and new voices with new stories get heard. And if you stick around long enough, you get to see some faces that just keep fighting on and like keep putting out great products. One of my favorite people in comics right now is David Pepos. And I like to call him the best pitch man I've ever heard. If you ever get a chance to check out his comics, they're fantastic. He does this
David Pepos?
Yeah, Dave Pepos. It's Pepose.
Okay.
If you're familiar with Patton Oswalt shouted out his comic, which is incredible.
Wow.
Yeah, he had a comic, his comic Going to the Chapel. Patton Oswalt's a fan. But he did a comic called Spencer and Locke, which was this Sin City meets Calvin and Hobbes. And it was incredible. And that's how you pitch it. Like right off the bat, you knew the story that he was going
Two
for.
reference points, and
he had a great reference point, and he can just pull you in like that. And he just ran a monster campaign of a Kickstarter for his book called The OZ, which is like the occupied zone, but it is specifically in reference to Oz.
Yeah.
So he had this crazy story, and I just looked at his campaign. Of course, I was going to support it because he's a friend. But then I read it. I was like, oh my god, this is amazing! Like, how did he do this? And everything came together for him on that one. Like, the art looks fantastic. He put preview pages up that were fantastic. And every now and then you just see a guy like that who has all these incredible ideas. And he just keeps churning them out, and people just pick up on it and love it. And that's all you can hope to do, I think, as a creator. But yeah, for comics, it's tough because I don't think the big publishers are in an awkward position right now, because I feel
keep them there.
I would never keep them there because I love myself some Spider-Man comics. Like, if you go through my boxes, that's like one of my biggest titles is probably Batman, Spider-Man, X-Men, and those are the comics I grew up with. But
why do you say that they're in an awkward position again?
I think the industry has been seeing losses of readership over the last couple of years, and that.
Do you think the indie scene is cannibal or taking away from that at all?
I don't know what it is, but I think a lot of it is it's hard to follow the major publishers because it seems like they just keep going back to number ones. Like,
I was just going to say, yeah, even having the limited knowledge about the current state of comics as I have, when I was growing up, it was like constant reboots that you just got inundated with, like 18 different Spider-Mans at once. Which one do you want to read? Because you can't pay for every single book every week or every 2 weeks.
And it's a little tougher because, I feel like when I was a little kid, books were like $1. To $2, like tops, right? Like,
and now what are they, $3 or $4, $3.50?
They're $5.
Yeah, that tells you when I stopped buying comics.
Yeah, it's like, do I want candy or do I want candy's cheaper? Like, that's kind of where you're at nowadays if you're a kid. So,
and also I think it seemed like they were doing deliberate things with the characters that were not less creative decisions and more marketing decisions at some point for me. And when you do that enough, you lose, I don't love the word, but you do lose a sense of authenticity and genuine storytelling because you're tailoring your story more towards a particular audience or to try to attract and excite a particular audience than you are just conveying a story organically from a creator's perspective. It's like trying to game the system in a way.
Yeah, there's a little bit of that, but if you think about it, I mean, that could occur anywhere with marketing, and I get that system, and to me that's fine. But if you're going to do it, it really is just tossing a lot of stuff at a wall, right, to see what's
right. Yeah.
And unfortunately, like, if you just keep experimenting and you have very little success out of that, then people aren't necessarily going to want to come back to that. And it's like, well, let's just keep refreshing it. It's like, well, find the thing that's really good and stick with it. Like, one of the things that always gets me about comics that sometimes throws me off is you'll have a creative team that you really like on a title, and then they'll just disappear, and you're like, where did they go? Like,
and then the comic goes downhill fast.
Yeah, the comic goes downhill. And it's like, wait, they could at least do like a 3-year run on this. I'd be okay with that. And I get, situations change for people. Sometimes you want to test a team out on a different project. And that's totally idea. Okay.
Yeah,
but
playing my own devil's advocate, I would say even you want to test an idea. But the question I would pose to you, being so active in the spaces, and I'll set the framework by saying when I watch a new anime, I know I might not be into it for the first 1, 2, or maybe even 3 episodes, but by episode 4 in a 26 episode series, I should be able to know if I'm going to enjoy the series or not.
You would hope, but
right?
You would also hope that you got the hook in like the first 1 or 2
right.
episodes, right?
So for you as a reader and a creator, how many episodes deep into a comic would you go before you say, okay, I'm not going to buy this anymore, or I'm not going to read this anymore?
I'm at the point where I'm just buying comics now. You can see the boxes. Yeah, I haven't had a chance to read stuff. I try to make time for it. But if I do start reading the series and it's been like 2 issues in and I don't like it, I generally won't go back to it.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I think that makes sense. Was it that way when you were a younger comic book reader?
I think it's always been that way for me, but for me, it's also a lot about the art. And, it wasn't until maybe the last 5-6 years that I started appreciating writing a lot more and what writers do. And, you see writers like a Kelly C. DeConnick, a Rick Remender, a Matt Fraction. And I was like, oh, these stories are consistently from writers that I enjoy. And like, I like seeing these stories. Again, Greg Rucka, I would say, is like a pretty good one. But yeah, so that's where I'm at now. But what always drew me into comics, and obviously as an artist, I think everybody can understand that it's the art. So, I came up with a lot of 90s comics. So all like the Image founders, if you will, like a Todd McFarlane, a Jim Lee, Will Spartacio, Dale Keown, who, in my opinion, has always drawn the best Incredible Hulk. So it was stuff like that brought me in and kept me into comics, and I would look for their artwork. Rob Liefeld was one of those guys. People love to crap on Rob, but his artwork has a place in comics. Like what he did in 90s comic is incredible. What a lot of those guys did can't be replicated. You're talking about guys who sold 1 million copies of single issues. Like I think you're lucky nowadays if you can sell like 3,000 copies of a single issue.
Wow.
But again, different times. Books were a lot cheaper back then. Everything was on newsprint, and it was easier to move that. You can move comics out of a convenience store, out of a candy shop.
Yeah. What about, how does digital distribution play Comixology? And I don't know. I don't even know what other platforms there are besides Comixology.
There's a few of them. Comixology obviously is the biggest one. I'm more of an analog kind of guy. I like having physical books, but I know for some people it makes all the difference. Like they don't want the physical books. They just want to minimize their space. And,
right.
It's, hey, however you can get a book out there, power to you. If it works, it works. I know it's tough on indie creators because you really do have to get out there and stomp the ground to be seen and be heard. I obviously have to do it. All the people I know have to do it. You even have to do it if you're, getting into a major publisher like Image, for example, because Image is creator owned. And so a lot of the onus also rests on you as a creator to be a marketing person, a social media person, to get out there and toot your own horn. And it can be tough, especially if you think about creative people. A lot of people are introverted.
Right.
And they don't necessarily think about how to accomplish that. Not everybody's gregarious. You can be the best writer. You can be super friendly, but you don't necessarily want to interact with people. That could be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And, being that we're on Kickstarter with Danger Arcade, the anthology, it's the same way. It's hard to get out there and go, well, Kickstarter makes me feel like kind of scummy if I'm asking for money, but you can't think that way. If you're going to run a Kickstarter campaign, the crowdfunding
right. If you want to do it for a living, it's just a different way to access that audience, right?
You're hoping to build upon your audience, and the best way I can explain it to people is I've sat in on enough panels about Kickstarters to understand that crowdfunding is ultimately an audience builder. You're just trying to build a fan base, trying to build an audience, people that will receive your work. You can only hope to bring them a good product and have them come back. If
you want to reframe it, it's in a lot of ways like a pre-sale.
Yeah, it really is a pre-sale. It's a chance for you just to showcase your abilities. And the only thing you can do if you're a creator is be consistent, put it out there, and hope that everybody really enjoys what you do and will come back for it, no matter what the projects are.
That's where I have to chime in and say everybody's going to look for your live sketching every Friday between 11 p.m. and 2 a.m. Not a set time, but a general time that you're going to be doing it, right?
I do have to get better at that, yes. Well, live streaming has never been a thing for me. Like it's like you watch YouTubers, but I think we never think of what if we go on and do that? Like, how do we hit like 1 million subscribers? But I do like to pop on every now and then just in the hopes that maybe somebody out there is watching and I can help somebody figure out stuff that I had to figure out.
Right. I do a little bit of work on YouTube, but
Okay,
generally what I do is like highly edited and highly produced for a one-man show, I'll say.
nice.
And I'll share with you afterwards. But
Okay.
yeah, I think if you're gonna, my advice to you, not that I'm in a position to give advice, but
Oh, I'll take it.
if you're gonna do it anyway, you might as
Uh,
well film it and live stream it if
yeah,
um the production cost or the onus to have the production is not too high. You turn
yeah.
on a camera and get it angled right and start drawing away and forget that it's even on.
That's the thing. I'll be on Twitch every now and then, and I have a buddy, Brett Newton, who goes by Threat Design on Twitch. He's a fantastic artist. He plays Dead by Daylight. I don't know if you played Dead by Daylight. It's a murder game. You basically are like a movie killer, if you will, like a Jason Freddy kind of character.
Uh-huh.
You go
Okay.
around just killing innocent people, and then it's like teams, right? So the team has to avoid you, I think, and then they can fight you, but mainly they have to avoid you, and then you just have to hunt them down. But he plays that, and he's an affiliate. I know that, so he has a bunch of followers. But every now and then he'll like raid or like jump into my Twitch, and to him, he's like, "You need a better setup because it sounds like you're doing dishes all the time." I'm like, "I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what the noise is coming from. I'm sorry." So yeah, I have to figure that out and be better about it for sure.
I have a lot to figure out as well on my end for, I mean, despite being technically a millennial, probably somewhere in the middle or
Yeah,
upper part of that generation, like I've quickly become pretty internet illiterate.
that's good. I'm just gonna keep claiming that I'm a luddite. I'm just technically inept. So if anybody wants to help me in any way, feel free to jump in.
Well, we could work on it together. Maybe we could,
Appreciate that. Thank
any
you.
advice people send through, I'll share with you. We could take advantage of it.
All right. Help me figure out why it sounds like I'm doing dishes when I'm drawing.
You could probably just mute your microphone.
Yeah, I think I've moved on to that because usually I play like I'll stream.
It's like troubleshooting annoying sounds in the background. Mute
Yeah.
your microphone. Oh yeah, genius idea.
Yeah, because usually I would stream music through a speaker, but then I realized that you could play music and just stream it directly from your desktop. Things I discover.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's always a work in progress. I think the hardest part is getting over initial hurdles when you're beginning any sort of new creative endeavor. Like, oh, I saw this awesome comic. I think I could draw something like it. It inspired me. And people draw one image and then they get discouraged because it's not like what they want to produce. It's not the image they have in their head. And same for doing this podcast. I hope to improve, every time I jump on here with somebody new. But in that vein of thought, I wanted to ask about your origin story. You kind of alluded to 8-year time frame where you were thinking about getting into comic books, but then it was really the last 4 years that you were able to really go after it. So I may have misspoke in terms of the time frame. So if you
no,
could
that's about right.
clarify that, and then give us an idea of like who is the young boy Don, what were you drawing as a kid if you started that young, and
I
then
did.
the timeline to now.
Yeah, I've always been drawing, from what I understand. My family likes to say I've been drawing since I was about 2, and I fell in love with comics around 5 or 6. I'm originally from Seattle, and I grew up in this area called Burien. And my mom, she was studying back then. She would take me to the library with her, and she'd just drop me off in the kids section. And that's where I discovered comic books. And, I found titles like X-Men. John Byrne was doing Superman at that time. Walt Simonson was doing Thor, if you're familiar with any of these guys. And Walt Simonson's art just fascinated me because he does these really fine line drawings, and they're just so frenetic and energetic. And I was like, what is this Thor? What is Asgard? And then John Byrne, there were John Byrne comics because I guess he had moved from Marvel to DC to do Superman, but he had done a run on X-Men, so there is X-Men comics. And I remember the first time I saw Storm, I thought she was like the coolest thing because she had a mohawk
Uh-huh,
back then.
yeah.
But yeah, it was, I discovered comics at the library. I found out that Batman started as a comic. Annie, I read a bunch of Annie comics as a kid because I thought that was cool. Looking back on it, it was somewhat racist. Now that I think about it. But, it's an anachronism, right? Like, in the time, it wasn't considered racist, but it is, like, what it is now.
Yeah, it's
But,
like a time capsule.
yeah, so these
I
are...
hope that those sorts of titles aren't erased, but kind of giving context.
So what was happening within that time frame? Yeah, you can only hope that that people look back and understand what the circumstances were, or what the times were like then.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I would read these compendiums. I read a compendium that was like the original Batman comics, the Bill Finger, Bob Kane books, and they had reruns. Because Batman was syndicated back then, so it was the reruns of the old '66 show. I was like, oh my god, there's
Pop, bam,
books
bow.
of this.
Yeah,
there's books of this. Like, what? I could just sit and read this all day, and like, there's 200 million stories of just Batman. Like, you're a little kid, and the book is like that thick.
Yeah, it feels like it's never gonna end.
Yeah, it feels like it's never gonna end.
In a good way.
Yeah.
In the best sort of way. There's unlimited Batman. I could read the rest of my life.
Yeah. Like, you're never going to run out of Batman. And kind of funny how true that is right now. But yeah, that's what got me into it. And, I started drawing then, and I got really into comics, during the 90s with the Image people and what they were doing. Because I loved all of the Marvel stuff too back then. Like, I loved Jim Lee, Chris Claremont's X-Men. I loved the crazy style that Todd McFarlane had going on Spider-Man and Incredible Hulk. And you do these like bulky, weird cropped artwork frames and panels, and you're just like, man, that guy could squeeze so much into a panel. And his Spider-Man was wild. Like, I'd never seen Spider-Man as a contortionist before.
Really lanky and yeah.
Yeah, he was like really lanky, and he could contort his body in all sorts of ways. And so stuff like that really just sparked the imagination. And it was around the same time, too, that I started reading things like Dark Knight Returns.
Who is the artist that did Max?
Sam
Max?
Keith.
Yeah. Didn't he do Hulk as well?
He did some Hulk images. I don't know if he had
Maybe it was just cover
Hulk,
art or something, yeah.
But yeah, he did have a few Hulk drawings, I believe, for Marvel Tales, which was where he did a lot of like the Weapon X Wolverine stuff that he's familiar for.
Right.
Before he did the Max, which a lot of people love. And they recently did, I think, Max and Batman run for DC.
Interesting.
Yeah,
I remember when I tried to read, or I think there was also a brief animation.
Yeah, he had a cartoon for a while.
And I had no idea what was going on. Maybe I was too young or just...
Yeah, I never watched it. I own it, but I haven't read it yet because I just recently picked them up. Because I had a friend, and she was like, oh, you got to read the Max. It's fantastic. Because I think what it is he's schizophrenic and homeless, right? And the comic,
yes.
You can't tell if it's his reality.
It blurs lines, and I think
yeah.
I don't think I had the mind for that when I was young, like to be able to decipher what was going on, or figure out the abstractions that were happening with time and place and body and universe.
But that's what's special about comics, right? Like,
I know. Yeah, I still remember it. I brought it up right now.
So I grew up with that, and I thought maybe there might be a career with me, but I never pursued it. And when I went to college, I actually completely forgot about it. I sold off a lot of my books. Comics.
Were you drawing this? I mean, were you drawing this whole time? And
I've always been.
When you were in the library, were you like kind of copying and trying to copy some images from the comic books? And like, what was the genesis and process and evolution of your own artwork? Yeah.
It wasn't until I was a little bit older as a kid, I just spent most of my time reading comics. And I wish I could go back to that time because I had so many comics to read. And it wasn't until I was maybe like 10 or 11 that I started getting really into drawing comics. And that was because of movies, that my uncles would let me watch, like Terminator or Predator, RoboCop. stuff like that. And I was like, oh, like we can draw these characters and it'll be so cool to like add even more guns to them because you can't have enough guns, right?
Right.
It's a very 90s mentality of comics, I feel like.
What about when you first interacted with Ninja Turtles? Were you drawing your own? I remember me and my brother would wake up like every morning before school. We were drawing probably two of our own anthropomorphic characters every morning, and we had like a stack of these are my characters, these are my characters.
Yeah.
And we were sketching the just finding animals out of a visual animal encyclopedia.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
Did you keep any of those?
I would love to discover them in the attic, but at the same time, I kind of don't want to because I know in my mind they're much better than they actually are as a kid's drawing.
You got to revisit them and improve upon them. That's the goal.
Yeah.
No, I think as a kid, because the movies had also just come out, the live action movies, and the cartoon had already blown up at that point. And, you know, I'm pretty sure I could draw the Playmate style, cartoon style of Ninja Turtle without even thinking about it.
Right.
Like without a reference photo, I'm pretty sure I could do it. But, and then to discover that there were comics was even more amazing. And then the movie came out, and it became obsession, right? I remember my cousin and I watched the movie. I believe it was we watched it like 9 times in a row in the theater. Like we were there from afternoon until nighttime. His mom had already watched like 4 other movies.
And you sat in the same theater.
We sat in the same theater. Yeah, we would leave, go hide, come back, watch the movie again, and we memorized like all the lines and stuff. And we just, that's what kids do. You just memorize lines and repeat them to each other and act out the scenes. But so that's my fondest memory of the Ninja Turtles. And then, that's still around the same time that I was drawing and copying comics and whatever I could get my hands on and see as I was trying to figure out back then. And, that passion, I think, lasted through high school. Like I said, I lost it in college. Went to worked in the corporate realm for a little while.
So you weren't really drawing at all in college then?
I actually was, because I was doing design stuff for the UCLA Student Alumni Association. I did a lot of t-shirt designs for them. But I wasn't dealing in comics. I was dealing more in like graphic design. And then it was funny. I went to school, thought about going into the medical field, did not enjoy school. And in my last like 2.5 years, I decided that I want to learn something else, and I went into fine art. And I thought I would learn like how to draw and like technical drawing skills. And I went to UCLA, and their art department is completely different. It's all
technical, meaning like traditional technique or technical?
Yeah, like traditional technique, like drafting, doing a lot of perspective work, rendering, that sort of thing. And that school at that time, I didn't know this, but they were the #1 art school in the country. And it was because of the quality of faculty that they had. And all the faculty were like these world-renowned sculptors and painters that were there. Like Larry Pittman was one of my teachers. Charlie Ray, who's an amazing sculptor, was one of my teachers. So then I became more of like a sculptor performance style artist and concentrated on that. And that actually, taught me a lot of skills and a lot of different ways of understanding art and looking at art, which I parlay now into doing comics.
That's awesome.
It's fascinating when you can go and listen to another artist talk about those same exact experiences in terms of how they look at art and think about art. I don't know. Are you familiar with Bilson Kevich at all?
No, it doesn't ring a bell.
Bilson Kevich is a really popular artist. He's been doing a lot of painting covers for like Walking Dead and stuff, but he became super popular for doing like Electro Lives comics for Marvel and New Mutants for Marvel, like back in the 80s. He's like one of the first American artists to bring painting into comics, and he's a phenomenal draftsman, like renderer.
I have a feeling if I saw some of his covers, I'd probably recognize them.
Know. If you're into hip hop at all,
he
did the cover to Kid Cudi's Man on the Moon album.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's done a lot of album covers, exactly, but that one's my favorite because it's also one of my favorite albums.
Yeah, me too.
And so that cover is a Bilson Kevich cover. But yeah, I've listened to him talk about artwork, and he has a similar taste of things that he likes to look at. Like I really like Franz Klein, who's an American abstract expressionist, and I've heard him talk about it. And the panel was like, oh my God, we can talk about art. This would be amazing if he had time and I could just sit down and talk to him about it. So I hope to do that one day because I heard he's a very nice guy.
And so you were in that program.
Oh yeah, I was in that program and I was in the art world for a few years. And I've done sculptures. I've been in gallery shows with friends. But that also was a grind, and it wasn't the type of environment that I was passionate about or necessarily wanted to be in. So I left that and actually went corporate, and I worked for the Rand Corporation. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Rand Corporation or not, but they're a really well-known think tank. Conservatives hate them, liberals hate them, everybody hates them, but they do good work, and they've moved from military stuff to a lot more social policy work and health research. And I was there for about 10 years, and sometime in those 10 years, I just kept drawing on everything. And that's when something clicked in my head. My coworker's like, it doesn't look like you want to be here. And I was like, I love you guys and I like to work with you, but I feel like I need to be doing something else.
How did you parlay from art into, I mean, that's a pretty
into research
different field. Yeah.
I have a science background.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So it was scientific research you were doing there.
Yeah, somewhat. It was policy research, but I've always loved the environment of research. I like analysis and analyzing things and problem solving. And it started as a part-time job where I would just come in to help like interview people. And then they're like, would you like to become a supervisor and have health benefits? And I was like, yes.
Yes, I could go to the doctor.
Yeah, so it became a full-time job. Yeah, I was there for 10 years.
Wow.
And then,
I think that jump or the decision to transition. So let me let you finish actually with the question. Did you just quit and jump into comic books at first?
I left Rand. We were thankfully, during that time, I was being supportive of my wife, and she was getting her career started, and she's an editor for like television, film, and she got into a really good place. She's in a really good place right now. And she's like, hey, if Rand is not where you want to be, maybe you should pursue what you think you're good at and love, and clearly you're good at it, and I think you have a pretty good future and you can get something accomplished. And I was thankful to have that sort of a relationship and a person who can support me like that behind me to rally me. And I made the transition. I left the Rand Corporation. I left a really good work environment. I left stability that I would just keep cracking at my skills until I was good enough to get out there. And as luck would have it, I've been blessed, if you will, for lack of a better term, I guess, that I've been involved with a lot of fantastic projects and met a lot of fantastic people and can keep doing this. Yeah.
And blessed, or a combination of really good skill and a little bit of luck. Some combination of those two ingredients.
It's always, it always is opportunity and rising to meet opportunity with preparation.
There you go. I like opportunity better than luck. I didn't want to. Yeah.
I know. No, luck is definitely involved in it.
Okay.
You definitely need.
I was searching for a better word a little bit, but couldn't come up with one.
That's all right. Sometimes the words just escape you, but it's, I feel just. I can't imagine some of the stuff I've been able to do. Like as a kid, if you go, you're going to be drawing Spider-Man on trading cards from Marvel one day. I'm like, what? All right, cool. Like Dustin Nguyen is going to do a variant cover for our comic book that you're doing. And it was like, okay. Or, I don't know if you know, but I helped with the Black Lives Matter Punisher logo for Jerry Conway when he did Skulls for Justice.
Is that your Instagram?
Yeah, so that's my Instagram.
Okay, awesome.
So he ran the Skulls for Justice fundraiser because, his stance, and I totally agree with him, is that police shouldn't be using the symbol of a vigilante to represent carrying out justice.
Right.
I feel like, cops, we look to cops to be the voice of law and order. And that's exactly what they should be, and they shouldn't.
Right. Yeah. The Punisher is more a sign of vigilante justice.
Yeah, it's
taking justice into your own hands and not abiding by law. Yeah.
And you talk about a guy who's killed cops, right? He's gone after dirty cops. And it's fun to explore those stories in comics. We have that latitude in fiction to like go and explore characters that are violent, that are gruesome. But you would never want to come across like Jigsaw like on the street, right? Like
right.
Or from Saw specifically, but also from the Marvel universe, I guess, that Jigsaw, or Frank Castle. That shouldn't ever be the case, especially when you think of the society that we're in and the standards that we want to hold each other to, and that we want to be better people. And I feel like, his call at that point in time was a call for us to look towards being better people. No matter what you think about the Black Lives Matter organization, what it was within the moment, I feel like it was important. Like that was something that definitely needs to be addressed, still needs to be addressed to this day. But, to be able to say that I did something for the Punisher's co-creator is insane.
Yeah. And so to be clear, Blue Lives Matter was co-opting the Punisher logo? Is that and then he reacted by having the Black Lives Matter Punisher logo created? Am I understanding correctly?
Yeah, he kept seeing the logo for the Punisher being co-opted by law enforcement and by military.
Okay, yeah.
And, granted that Frank is a Marine, but what they were doing is basically using it in an you're taking a character that has a vigilante. It's extrajudicial. It's outside the realm of the law.
Right.
And then you're purporting it to be a representation of the law. So he was flummoxed by that, and he's always been interviewed about it. His stance has always been the same. So he decided to do something about it and then fundraise against the Blue Lives Matter idea. And I don't know if Blue Lives Matter actually took that on.
And I'm sorry, I don't mean to cast any specific group in a particular light, but I just associated police support with the Blue Lives Matter movement. Yeah. So apologies if anybody was offended by that. But basically, one group of people who were in support of the police side of things were using this logo without permission.
Yeah.
And it seems like he kind of balanced the equation by creating
he wanted to bring attention to it, for sure.
That would bring attention to the other side.
Yeah, because I think Marvel itself has never taken an official stance, and it's understandable why.
It's just weird, though, because, I mean, if anybody used Mickey Mouse, you'd be sure as shit that Disney would come after them. So,
and they have, oddly enough. Like, Mickey has been co-opted. I've seen images of it. I'm like, oh, look at that. I'm amazed they haven't come, but from what I understand, they have started going after anybody using any Disney Marvel imagery. So shops have been like removing the images. But, for us, what Jerry wanted was to take just the inspiration of the Punisher logo and then flip that idea into something new. And I think a lot of us were able to accomplish that, and it was an amazing team of creators he got together. I know there was Moff San, and Jerry Ordway was a part of it. Ordway is known for his work as a writer and an artist. He's done Superman, and he's friends with Jerry Conway, so that was also amazing to be like, hey, I'm also on a project with Jerry Ordway.
And it's cool that he didn't just sleep on it. He had some issue and he found a measured way to react. And I guess that's what you guys worked on.
Yeah. So that was an incredible opportunity, and I can't believe I had that in my life. So it's been one thing after another, and I hope I can continue that for years to come and produce good things.
Yeah, and getting back to when you made the leap from Rand to being a comic book artist, what was your practice or your preparation or your training to get to where you are? You said you had to make up for some time lost and up your skills. So how did you attack that with a schedule and do it systematically or some other way?
I just started drawing every day. I still am drawing every day. it's kind of an obsessive thing, is just to try to get better, because I feel like in the years that I've lost, they always say, really in indie industry, it's always a young man's game, if you will. Not to be exclusive, but just the old saying goes. So it's always young people that are up and coming, and we're at a point where anybody can be doing anything just because of the internet. It's just so much more democratized. So if you have something you want to do, and you can find a small amount of time to carve out to do it, why not try, right? And I was afforded the opportunity just to spend all my time doing it. And if I started out with a sketch blog where I would just upload a sketch every day, and it was a daily doodle sketch blog. And if you go back through it, you can find it at winningit.wordpress.com, I think. You can see how terrible I started out, and I just kept working on it until I got better and better. And I'm still working at it. I'm still learning new stuff and how to do things properly. And part of that also, my wife obviously is full of great advice. She would tell me, you need to go to conventions. So we started going to conventions, and I was shy about showing my work at first, because it's like, oh, I'm not good enough to be showing my work, but that's part of the process.
And just booking a table at the convention?
No, just showing up to conventions to do portfolio reviews.
And what's that entail? What's
so
that process like?
I can't recommend this enough, but if you get a chance, if you look at any con schedule, usually, if you're lucky, they'll do a portfolio review. Sometimes it's an artist, sometimes it's a company, but always look for a portfolio review to bring your work at, and then show, and then try to pick up on things that you can improve and work on those things. And that's what I started doing. And my very first portfolio review was actually with Brian Stelfreeze, who was known for doing Shadow the Bat back in the day for DC. And then more recently, he's been really well known for doing Black Panther with Ta-Nehisi Coates for Marvel. I think he did that title, I want to say about 6 years ago. But the man's a fantastic, amazing artist. He's an artist, and he was kind enough just to give me about 20 minutes of his time. And he's like, hey, you need to work on making your figures not look stiff, give it a little more movement, think about how they stand, how would this person stand, think about what flows on a page, is the story just about these people standing around doing this, or is there some stuff that's happening in the background that you can focus on and move in and out of? And so his words always ring in my head when I'm laying out a page, and I think about how to tell the story, where to move things. But yeah, that was the first step. And then every subsequent con, if there was a portfolio review, look for an artist that you like, go up to them, ask them if maybe they have a few minutes they can spare to look at your work, give you some feedback, or look for sometimes the panels themselves are reviews, and try to.
How hard was that for you at first? Just putting words into your mouth a little bit, that it was hard, but to approach a comic book artist who you really look up to and to be like, hey, can you look at my artwork? Was that hard for you? Yeah. So yeah, how did you muster up the willingness to do that?
It was a lot of standing around their tables, staring at them. And I think if you're standing there with a portfolio long enough, they start to look at you and go, you're here to ask me something, aren't you?
And they'll give you a nod.
Yeah, but there's definitely a little bit of that. And then, like I said, the easiest way is just to look for an actual portfolio review to go to. But if you can, and there's an artist whose work you admire, and you can ask them, be polite about it, obviously. Just ask them if they have a few minutes to spare you. And sometimes that even happens if you go to their panel, because, a lot of creators, they are hosted by, a con, and they'll have a spotlight or a showcase panel where they talk to the artist or have them sketch a little bit and talk about their work. And if you can just get a hold of them after they step off their panel, in the hallway, go, hey, do you have a minute? Can I come to your table? If you're down in Artist Alley or whatever. I've been really lucky to meet a lot of my heroes, and they've all been really nice so far. And I think, part of the comics industry that I love so much is that that's been a lot of the case a lot of the times. I've yet to meet a horrible person. I hope not to. But everybody, because ultimately when it comes down to, a lot of people started out indie too. And so they have that understanding of what you're trying to do and where you're coming from. And if they can help in any way, I mean, if I can help in any way, if anybody wants to come find me, I can impart anything that I've learned to help you out, let me know.
Yeah, that's awesome. One of the reasons I wanted to start this podcast too was to, like, what's your random is your creative endeavor is random. It's pretty specific to you and your inspiration. So when you created Pablo the Gorilla, nobody else could have created that, right? So there's some random nature that's individual to creativity. And then also playing on the idea and concept that I could have random encounters scheduled, but I didn't know you. I never saw your face.
Yeah.
We never spoke before this conversation. And in the course of the last, especially since the pandemic hit, I was just feeling like, man, like the news is so polarizing. I'm almost afraid to interact with people when I go to the supermarket just because of how, of the portrait that's portrayed by the media and the news. And I wanted to randomly encounter people like yourself just to prove the point to hopefully, you know, myself and hopefully other people that you can have a long form conversation with somebody you don't know.
That's amazing.
About, and some discovery over the course of that conversation. Yeah. So just to give you a little bit of insight, I don't know what brought me to share that with you at this point in time, but I felt compelled.
No, that's a great way to start
I guess
podcast.
it was building off your comment that actually going up to these people who you admire, it may seem scary, but people are generally nice.
I mean, that's all we can hope for. I feel like with everything we're inundated with in media right now, and like how social media is geared, I feel like social media is particularly geared towards antagonism. Like, I feel like people who can antagonize other people, because trolling is like such a big thing,
right?
Like, they get the most viewership, if you will. Like, that gets the most attention, right? It's always the squeakiest wheel gets the grease.
Right.
And that's how social media is geared. But that doesn't cause me to lose a belief in humanity, because I want people to be able to see other people as people. And, you know, like politics considered or aside, that shouldn't matter. Like, you should be able to approach somebody. Like, if I saw you and you tripped and fell and broke your leg, I would want to call for help for you. That's just how I am.
Regardless of my politics, or not even factoring that into the equation, right?
Yeah, like I'm not going to go through some checklist and be like, I'm sorry, are you a Democrat or a Republican? Like, who you like? There's just a thing on a level, and I feel like sometimes where we're at right now, we forget the idea of what America is and like what being an American is. And I love being an American so much. Like, I grew up in the Reagan times. I'm not gonna lie, like, my family's conservative. Like, we grew up conservative, and I personally am an independent. Like, I like to think about who the person is that I would be voting for, and what they stand for. But, you know, like, I grew up with people who voted for Reagan and like thought what he did was correct. And that, like, I don't stop to pause and go, do you support Reagan? Like, I'm not gonna buy your stuff. Like that. Like, that's my family, you know, like, I have Trump supporters, I have Biden supporters in my family, and these are people that I've grown up with all my life and I love. So, you know, like, they give me that same amount of respect, and I try not to disrespect them. I'm also, you know, being Vietnamese, being Asian, that's kind of built into the culture too. Like, you have your respect for elders, but even just on a personal level, when you approach people like at a convention or whatever, you're trying to make a connection with somebody.
Politics shouldn't matter.
Politics shouldn't matter, but it's just also, you know, we're all there for the same reason, right? Like, if you're at a convention,
right,
everybody's there to enjoy whatever fandom they're a part of. Like, we know we have something in common right there. So why not look at that first? And yeah, like, if your neighbor's house was burning and you had a hose, like, wouldn't you go help your neighbor out? Like,
yeah. I mean, that's a good example to boil it down to the human aspect.
Yeah.
But you don't, it doesn't have to come to the house burning down. It could just be a common interest in comics to bridge that gap, right?
And, you know, here's the thing about anything, I feel like, and people have a hard time understanding that there are just terrible people everywhere. Like, no matter what they identify as, like, just because you identify a certain way in a certain group doesn't mean that that group itself is devoid of terrible people. And that's just part of human nature.
Or full of them.
Yeah, where it's
Yeah.
just a spectrum of behavior. And the only thing you can hope to do is meet people who are good, even if your views are different, that want just to help out other people. And, you know, I think we're missing that sense and that idea of community, particularly because the way Americans feel like we have this independence and we like to celebrate, you know, where we come from, for example, maybe in terms of a nationality, and there is like maybe a little bit of need for tribalism, but at the same time you can celebrate and respect what other people are doing and maybe learn something from them and take something from them. And for me personally, that's food. Like, I love to eat. I enjoy other people's cultures through their food. And I feel like that is like a big unifying thing for me. And I appreciate when people bring that to my attention and celebrate their culture through food. I think that's something really special.
I mean, even
yeah.
artwork or media, think about Betty Boop going over to Japan during World War II sometime, being reimagined as Japanese manga and anime and re-exported to the United States in the form of whatever anime you're watching today. Like, the connection, the threads are there that tie it together all seamlessly, but the iterations, the cultural perspective on these mediums of art and communication are all different, I think. I mean, food too, right? People give American food, quote unquote, if you could give it quotes or not, a lot of crap, because they're like, what is American food? The country's only been in existence for 300 years. But at the end of the day, we fuse some things where the term that was used a lot, and it recently came to me when I was thinking about all things political, that was used when I was growing up all the time, was US is a melting pot. And that's a term I haven't heard recently, but I like it. It kind of, when I was growing up, it helped me make sense of all the diversity around me and helped me appreciate the diversity around me.
Yeah. And, you know, if you live in an area that's not diverse, I highly recommend diversifying your viewpoint and getting out there. Because, you know, like I said, I grew up as a kid in Washington. I remember going to school and being like one of 3 Asian kids. That's because the other Asian kid were siblings. So they were a brother and sister and me. Handful of black kids, mostly white kids. I didn't know what a Jewish person was until I came here to California, because that's where I'm at now. And that wasn't until like maybe 6th grade. We didn't have a lot of Jewish kids in the projects. So it wasn't until I transferred out and went to a better school, I was like, oh, Judaism, what's that?
Yeah. And it's amazing how, I mean, I recently moved from New York as a more liberally minded person to North Carolina, which is, you know, has a lot more conservative edges. And, you know, learning to appreciate that that this state and the way of living down here is different. Not that it justifies, in my view, some of their viewpoints, but I could kind of come to better understand some of the reasoning behind.
Speaking of which, if you go to Heroes Con next year, if we have conventions next year, come find me.
Yes, I absolutely will.
Yeah, I'll be at Heroes Con. I was supposed to be there this year.
Where is it?
It's Charlotte.
Okay, Charlotte. I'm in the Raleigh-Durham area. I know we have our own Comic-Con as well. I was planning to attend, but I'll definitely put Charlotte on my list.
Yeah, I was looking forward to some barbecue and some fried goodness out that way, and then this hit. So
I'll tell you what, I can't get enough of good barbecue.
I heard it's amazing out there. So like I said, I try to enjoy people's cultures through their food. And I feel like, you know, sometimes it's just about sitting down with somebody, cracking a beer, having a good laugh. And that's what brings people together sometimes.
And one thing that really struck me about your current project and the collective is that it is a brick and mortar kind of operation. You meet people physically and you put this together. So
Yeah.
can you speak about before COVID, how you guys were working through putting this together and how COVID impacted the process?
Of course. So, like I said, the project.
And if you need a break at any time, we could pause.
Oh yeah, that's fine. I'm a motor mouth. I will talk all day and night.
I like it.
Actually, you know what? Let me turn the light on really quick.
All right. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm gonna go. I just had to turn on the light. I was like, oh, that's right. It's getting darker sooner out here. So how do you like North Carolina?
I love it. Yeah. So I grew up and was living in, the suburbs of New York City.
Okay.
And I went to school in Hawaii. I lived in Japan for 2 years.
Wow.
So I had been around living in different areas after high school, but I came back to New York and was there for going on 7 years. And it was about time to switch it up. So
what brought you to Japan?
Interest in studying. So I did study abroad.
Oh, wow. Okay.
In college. I went to school in University of Hawaii, and then I was taking Japanese. I was studying, doing an Asian studies undergraduate major because I was a little too intimidated to just jump right into Japanese language outright.
Oh, well, do you feel like you want to jump into Japanese culture and language outright at this point? Is it something that's part of
I think I have, yeah.
Okay.
No, so I work in sales, and I have built my career up until this point working for Japanese companies. And my previous company, I used the language on a daily basis. I'm a little bit rusty now, but so I wanted to get into Japanese things. I wanted to learn to speak Japanese, but I was really intimidated by it. So when I went to Hawaii, University of Hawaii, which has some of the best Asian language programs in the country, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
I did Asian studies, which I could incorporate Japanese language classes into.
Yeah.
And I did a student exchange, and then I graduated with an Asian studies major and a Japanese minor. And then I graduated around the recession. And the only jobs I could get were by the fact that I could speak a little bit of Japanese at that time. Yeah. So over the course of my career, I just kind of kept hammering away at the skills.
That's fantastic.
Just by using it here and there. Yeah.
Around 08, 09-ish?
Yeah. So I graduated 08. I took an extra semester. So January, I was coming out of college looking at the gloom and doom around me.
Yeah, it was a tough period because I was still at Rand at that point, and crazy enough, because I was also doing hiring for Rand. A lot of
lawyers coming to look for work because they couldn't find it elsewhere.
Yeah. So I started out as an interviewer at Rand doing research interviews. So I've worked on projects, for like cancer research and stuff like that, where we talk to patients about the care that they're receiving. Before I left, one of the biggest projects that I was on was for the VA. We did the Wounded Warrior Project, and we discovered a lot of what was going on in the VA. Like, for example, I didn't know the VA database was not local. It's localized. It's not integrated. And so you don't port your information. Like, it doesn't come with you when you move out of state to a different VA.
Oh.
That was a big problem. So could you imagine? This was a really sad story. Obviously, I'm not going to talk about specifics because it's confidential, but just to give you an example, let's say a person changed their identity, their gender, if you will.
Okay.
And then moved out of state, and that information didn't go with them, and then you called them and misgender them. That's really upsetting, man. It was like the first time I ever had to deal with that.
Why would they have some information, like the phone number information, just because the contact information transfers, but the medical files
contact
don't?
info transfers, but not like the patient history stuff. And you could be going back like 30, 40 years. We spoke with a lot of people from like the Vietnam and Korean War, and that information didn't port with them for whatever reason, that they just didn't have that sort of structure available. And then, also to discover that you receive different care from different VAs depending on you were. And we heard some really just heartbreaking stories. And then, the big thing about the Wounded Warrior Project was also the mental health aspect of what our service people were receiving. And I have just deep admiration for service people. My dad was in the South Vietnamese Army fighting communists. Hence, you can see why my family has a very conservative background.
Right.
So, it just was one of those things where you hear these stories, or you misidentify a person who put their life on the line for this country, and you can see how heartbreaking that is.
Right.
So that that gave me a different perspective of that at that point. But that's why I'm always trying to learn.
I think overall, just people who served this country should be taken care of as
and that was
the way in which they deserve.
Another crazy thing is I didn't know military injuries are reported by percentage. That surprised me. So if you lose an arm, for example, right,
what percent
measured
of
in
the arm?
Percentage. Like if I was to talk to you, or you were to talk to me and go, I lost my arm, I would in my head go, you're 100% injured.
Right.
But the military goes, nope, that's 16% injured, because you're missing 16% of your body, I guess.
I'm shaking my head. I'm at a loss for words. That's insane.
So that was something I never knew about until I did that project. But just to go back on it, 2008, that whole recession period was insane. It was terrible to see how many people were just struggling for work, or to try to get work, to provide for themselves and their families. And it was incredible to see like how many overqualified people were trying to go for these jobs that you could normally go for people who are retired, maybe, or college students, or research grads were getting.
Right. Yeah, that's who I was competing with. I
guess. And you're looking.
And then at the same time, my girlfriend at the time was a dance major, dance theater, and I was looking to get work in NPO, NGO kind of area and field, and all the funding for those dried up. And then even in the private sector, the starter positions were being taken by people who had more experience and seniority. So
or multiple degrees.
It was a weird time reflecting back. And I have a buddy who recently graduated, a couple of months ago, and just thinking about him during the pandemic and the current economic situation, I wonder how, recent grads are managing, if telecommuting has made it any easier, because that wasn't quite as prevalent back in 2008.
No, it's actually, I was listening to an NPR segment, and I don't know if you know what's going on in New York, or if you keep up, but I guess a lot of people have moved out of New York into the country, because now, because of telecommuting, people don't care about being in New York anymore. They're like, we can have space, live our lives, just buy gigabit internet and telecommute. Like, why not have the space? So you have a bunch of abandoned apartments and houses out there, I guess.
And retail and commercial properties. I think that's going to be the real story as we go into 2021 and 2022 and beyond, is if New York could kind of reimagine themselves and attract companies back who have downsized considerably because they realize that telecommuting does work. Or if they, I think the two options are attract those folks back or reimagine how you use that space. So, I think there's opportunity there as well, but you got to be creative.
Yeah. That's always the case, I suppose, in any industry, is reinventing yourself, finding new pathways, forging ahead. Definitely an interesting time. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah. So the question before I went and grabbed some more water and asked if you needed a break at all was, how COVID and lockdown has impacted the anthology and the compilation. I guess starting with how you guys were planning to go about
Yeah.
bringing it together before COVID,
Mhm.
and then, you know, how you transitioned and pivoted.
Yeah, as you mentioned, we run pretty much a brick and mortar operation initially because we're based out of.
Which again, I want to say I love. Yeah, I really love to see that it was like, oh, people are actually meeting in physical spaces and
Yeah,
interacting
so
and exchanging ideas.
that's how the group started. It's group meetups, and once we're back, we're all vaccinated and well, and we have a pathway to better health. People are welcome. If you're in the Los Angeles area, come down to Manhattan Beach Comic Bug, and hopefully meetings will be back. They're, like I said, new Comic Book Day Wednesdays, 5 to 8, 5 to 9-ish. But yeah, so we would meet and we would discuss what we wanted to do. And this anthology had been in play, if you will, for about the last year and a half. But not to get into it, some stuff happened at the store. Things went awry. And then Don Walker, who I had mentioned before, who does Agent Wild and Reaper Corps, he was like, I really want to get this book out. We had some pretty big names attached to the project that unfortunately, didn't come through because, their schedule didn't permit or whatever the case may be. Thankfully, we still have Brandon Easton helping out, which is incredible, as well as Ed Dukeshire. But because of all these things, we just wanted a bright spot for the group and for the comic book store. And we thought, what better way to get some shine, get some eyes on our work than just to put it out there on Kickstarter. And if anything, working in comics is actually great because most of us don't leave home. Like, you just do your page, scan it in, whatever, and then just email it off to somebody. So that was already familiar. So that actually wasn't too difficult. It's just, it makes things a little more difficult to coordinate because you don't get to bounce ideas off of people in terms of, like marketing strategy or tactics or like coordinating any facet of the project in particular to manage. That becomes a little more difficult, obviously. But, I think there are a lot of amazing projects that I've had the joy of being a part of. And I was a part of 4 Kickstarters just in October, going on now. I'm part of 3 still. So Danger Arcade is being done with Sketchy Bugs. I'm part of Cthulhu Invades Oz, which just reached its 50% funding capacity, and Nightmare Theater, which is still running strong. And they're just blasting through their goal. So those are the 3 big ones that I still have going on. And Danger Arcade ends tomorrow morning. But yeah, everybody on all these projects, we've just been very fortunate that there is still a really big Kickstarter audience hungry for new material.
And for comic book Kickstarters, do you think that most of that audience is somehow native to Kickstarter? Like they're into funding Kickstarter comic book projects and find them within the platform, or are artists bringing their own audience in? What was your experience?
For Pablo the Gorilla, and if you read any of the Kickstarter guides, and if you're going to run a campaign, please read the Kickstarter guides. They're fantastic. I can't recommend them highly enough. The initial brunt of the attack is going to be your family and friends. That's who you're going to have to lean into to get out there. It's really important that you reach out to them and let them know what you're doing. And I'm fortunate enough that my family rolls deep. Vietnamese people are super close, and I had a huge benefactor in one of my aunts. Her entire family stepped up, and they were able to push me over the edge in terms of funding before I went to Comic-Con, because I went to Comic-Con specifically to promote Pablo the Gorilla, and it was something else to be able to walk into the convention and promote with an already funded project. So then everything just was gravy on top of that. But yeah, if you're going to start off initially, those are the people you're going to reach out for in terms of your audience. And the hope is you get enough shine and recognition from the Kickstarter algorithm. Speaking of algorithms that we were talking about earlier, that it'll compel your project and push it forward and make it more visible, because that's the thing you always want. And
right.
That's a whole different section that we can do a panel on at a convention if you ever want to talk about how to run a campaign.
Yeah, and to your point about leaning into your family and friends a little bit, like that is where we socially exist with close friends, but even acquaintances and people
Yeah.
you met one time who may share that interest. And I did a Kickstarter that wasn't successfully funded for a film I did in 2011. It's been a while. But I think that's one thing that it was advice that I ignored a little bit just because I was a little bashful to,
Yeah.
make that play. I think I did it in the final hours of my campaign,
Hmm.
and got some interest, but I could have used my own personal network much more than I did.
Yeah.
So
And you have to use it initially.
to your point, use it initially and use it well. And, don't be shy. If people want to support you as a person and or the project itself, they'll do it. If they don't want to support you, they won't.
Yeah.
So, I mean, people are sharing the most mundane, annoying things on their Facebook account, for example. If you're out there and you're feeling shy about sharing your project, you're doing something, you're putting in work. Share it
Yeah.
with the world. If they're interested in, if people are interested in supporting it, they will. If they're not interested, they won't.
And people are gun shy. Wow, I'm coming up with a lot of armed weapon references in this interview. People are a little bit gun shy when it comes to Kickstarter because they think of it in terms of begging for money. But what it is you're trying to get eyes on your project. Again, you're trying to build the audience. Yes, you would like the funding, but the hope is not only does your family and your and or friends, whichever the scenario is, because let's face it, some people rely on one more than the other sometimes. Uh, it's great to have that initial support, but in terms of what you were asking before, are Kickstarter supporters a niche group? Like, do they just support Kickstarters? Do they support comics in particular? I am a huge fan of Kickstarter. I now have backed over 80 comic book projects.
Wow.
So I have 80 comic book projects that I've backed, and so that's my particular thing that I love. I love comics, and if something
But
pops,
I guess to my question before,
yeah,
but directing it specifically at you, did you find most of those projects through Kickstarter itself, or something else brought you into Kickstarter for that specific project?
it's a little bit.
Is there a split?
Yeah, some of it is definitely friends. Like, I love supporting my friends. Some of it is like artists that I follow will do Kickstarters every now and then. I'll jump in to see what they're doing. And then some of it is discovery. You'd be surprised how much support comes from just discovery through Kickstarter itself. And I find myself doing it. I'll just pop in on Kickstarter and be like, what's happening on Kickstarter? Like, what crazy things are people doing? And, I may buy in to get a physical copy. I may just throw a couple of dollars that way and not ask for a reward just because I want to see it get made. And, running this Kickstarter, that was one of the things we talked about is I wanted to be sure that there was a dollar amount. And, when people were like, well, why would you want to have a dollar amount? It's because some people will come in at $1 or more, not want any rewards. Like, they don't care about that. They just want to see somebody succeed. And that is an amazing feeling. And it's nice to know that there are people out there that just want to do that. And, in Pablo the Grill, I had a few of those. I had people who are just like, hey, we like what you're doing. We'd like to see you do something good with it. Hopefully put something good out in the world. Don't care if we get it or not. Maybe we'll see you at a convention. Here's some money. And that's phenomenal to just know that there are people out there in the world that aren't just there to rain on your parade, And they're complete strangers. You don't have to know them. They don't have to know you. They're just out there looking for projects to support.
Yeah, and one thing I am committing to do, maybe starting this month, is after kind of re-engaging with Kickstarter and realizing all the amazing projects out there, like creating a budget for myself.
Yes.
Of like it could be $7 a month.
Yeah.
But using that $7 to fund Kickstarter projects, and I could either use all the $7 for one project, or I could split $1 across 7 projects, but just being engaged and supporting people in that way and thinking of it as my own personal subscription platform. I shell out dollars to Netflix every month, Spotify every month. Why can't I support these indie creators and artists and musicians to help bring their projects to fruition?
And speaking of $1 going a long way, if you support Danger Arcade right now, they unlocked 2 digital stashes of comics. So for $1, you can get 20 digital comics, which is
Wow.
insane. I keep asking, I was like, do you guys want to keep money? Like, what's happening here?
I will add in there, because of the value, you might consider giving a little bit more.
Yeah.
Not to guilt trip people. Give $1 if you can. If you could give a little bit more,
I always say,
go for another $1 or $2.
Yeah, I honestly do mean this about Kickstarter, and you'd be surprised because people don't know this, but every $1, every time you like the project, every comment, because you can comment after you back a project. A lot of people don't realize this. So every time you back a project, go back and leave them a comment. If you really like the project, go back and just say, hey, just saying hi, or like anything, just throw in a bunch of emojis. But that all goes towards the Kickstarter algorithm. And a lot of people running Kickstarters don't know this. And I try to impart that much information on them.
That's good
people
wisdom.
share, yeah.
So what would it do for a
comment,
project that's already funded? If that creator creates another project, it'll help boost them as a creator?
No, it's for within the project that you're working on. So if it's already funded, that's already too late. But if the project is running, then that ups the visibility for the project. But having a successful Kickstarter under your belt, supporting Kickstarters, that just shows the rest of the community how much a part of the community that you are. And people like to see that. So if you're gonna do a project on Kickstarter, be a member of the community. Support other people's projects, support other people's work. And if you're doing comic books, that doesn't mean you just have to be supporting comic books. Like, go support other things that you think are cool. Like Jim Lee recently had a backpack that he cooperated on, and it was an artist backpack, and I thought that was a cool idea. And I had a friend actually support just to get the backpack. I was like, the backpack's a little too much for me. I already have a backpack. But still a cool project. But yeah, like one of the ones I just supported recently that I thought was super cool. Because you were asking about will big publishers like DC or Marvel or Image look to suppress? No, they're actually getting involved. Like, we just saw Boom Studios do an amazing collaboration called Berserker with Keanu Reeves, and I backed that project. And they, I think.
And you mentioned Boom Studios before. Did they get involved in the current project you have on Kickstarter?
For Danger Arcade, yeah, they backed our project for $100. So they had
awesome.
An initiative that they, right after they funded Berserker, they wanted to give back to the community. And some people might go, oh, it's a ploy, but I've been lucky enough to meet the CEO of Boom Studios, and I know he's a huge supporter of indie comics. And it was nice to see them give back to a community that funded them. I think they funded Berserker at like $1 million plus.
Wow.
But they did an initiative where they chose 100 comic book projects, first-time campaigns, just to support. And Danger Arcade was one of those projects.
Yeah, so, and it's even if there is some marketing involved, it's also a altruistic good thing. So who cares at the end of the day?
If I could get a book out to Boom Studios and be like, hey, this is our creator group. I hope you like the book and like what you see, and let us know if we can do anything for you. That's just another connection, another network. I was on.
And it's the thing that's cool about it is I see it as networking through the work, right?
Yeah.
You wouldn't have had that networking opportunity to exchange some dollars if you didn't have actual, product coming out.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's better than networking.
Yes. But that's also a lot of what the comic book industry is, I feel like. I don't know if a lot of people talk about that, but for anybody out there who's interested in making a comic, because I know, what you're dealing with is creativity, the randomness of meeting somebody and learning a little bit about what they do. For anybody out there who wants to make something, just make it. That's like such an important first step. I was lucky enough to have friends and family that I could rely on and help me and support me during this time. But one of the biggest things was, Dustin Nguyen is a great friend because the first time I ever met him, he followed me on social media. I think mainly because we have the same last name and my thing is Winning It, and he thought it was funny. But I just kept putting out art, and every time I would see him, he's like, hey, when are you going to have a book out? Hey, do you have a book out? And he really
That's
encouraged
amazing
me.
encouragement. Yeah.
Yeah, and he really encouraged me to get my work out there and put it out. And that's like one of the biggest hurdles for any creator is to get your work out there. You know, like that's I always say what separates the person behind the table at an artist alley, like from the person standing in front of them. It's like you're that person who took the time and the energy to make a complete thing that you're trying to show the world. And that's a huge first step. That's the hurdle that everybody wants to get over.
Right. Right. And it's not an easy hurdle, but really
No.
all's it you're the only person getting in your own way. And I'm
Yeah.
speaking from personal experience, right? Doing my own projects. I'm my own worst enemy when it comes to bringing an idea to fruition. Self-doubt and stuff like that could get in your way. But if you put in the work, even when you're having a bad day, you're going to end up with a finished product, and you end up with enough finished products. Eventually,
Yeah.
they're going to improve and get better, and you're going to have something to share that's worthwhile and something you could be proud of.
Exactly. Yeah. And
And
that's like,
along the way, you find people who you're only halfway through your evolution as an artist,
yeah.
but people start encouraging you because they see that you're on that creative journey.
So I hope have you revisited your film project for Kickstarter?
I filmed it. It's called Rider Reel.
Okay.
And rider comes from common rider, which is masked, also known as masked rider. It's a Japanese live action tokusatsu show, kind
Yeah.
of like Power Rangers
Yeah. I think I have
in
a
that
buddy who calls
genre.
it Cayman Rider. I'm like the dude with the motorcycle, the mask thing. He's like,
Yes,
yeah,
yes. Yeah.
yeah. I know what you're talking about.
So the idea was to take elements from that
Okay.
and bridge it into a drama, so kind of like a real superhero type narrative. So
Okay.
I finished the film and I submitted it to some film festivals in 2018. Got into one,
Congratulations.
and yeah, it was all right. So now I need to make like a final cut. I'm a little bit of I don't want to call myself a perfectionist, but I'm never really satisfied with the finished product. And I'm constantly making tweaks, especially when it's something as all-encompassing as a feature-length film for your first project.
That's the
So
path of the auteur, right? Like you're trying to get your work out there and you want it to be just right, like how your vision is.
yeah, which is really hard. And for anybody out there who's going after their own guerrilla film project, it's tough, and don't be discouraged, because you have a lot of at the end of the day, you might have a movie and an idea in your mind, but you're collaborating with a lot of people, and some of their artistic vision is going to come into it too.
And that's
And
good.
then,
Collaboration.
yeah. It's a beautiful thing. And also the fact that you're working with limited crew, you're running a guerrilla
Yeah.
crew. The quality might not be as good as you want it. And that's really the sticking point for me, was I was trying to work out quality issues.
Yeah.
But that being said, yeah, I shared it with a couple of people on a indie tokusatsu group that I'm a part of on Facebook, and they gave some feedback. So I need to cut out like a little bit of fluff here and there, and then just put it on YouTube for the world to see.
That's fantastic.
Yeah,
Congratulations, man.
thank you.
I hope to see it soon.
Yeah, I'll send it to you after this conversation.
All right. I'm excited about it.
And then once I cut out a couple of little snips, I'll share it to people listening to this podcast. So what's your random community that we hope to grow?
Okay. So once it's all said and done, are you looking to distribute it? Like, is it a short film or is it a longer form?
It is 75 minutes, so it would be in the feature category.
It's a feature category.
Yeah. I'm planning on doing more film work in the future. I don't think that one is up to levels of quality where I would be satisfied, or I don't know if anybody would want to distribute it, and I don't know if I would want it to be distributed.
Do you want to show it at conventions?
I
Oh,
would
sorry,
love
I didn't
to.
mean to cut you off.
No, 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 not at all. Yeah, I would love to if there was an
Because
audience for it.
I mean, that's a thing. Like you can, if you have a film and you want to promote it, apply to do a convention panel where you can show it. Be like, hey, I have a film I'd like to show. And a lot of conventions also have film festivals, and they sometimes accept independent entries. So definitely a thing to look for.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
don't just think about the film festival circuit, but also think about other avenues, especially if you're dealing with something like Kamen Rider and it fits into that genre. Look for anime and manga cons that have film festivals themselves.
That's great advice. Yeah. I
Yeah,
never would have thought of that as a potential outlet.
I try to learn from better people. That's that's like the biggest thing. The biggest
And
takeaway
through
from
that,
all
you've
of
become a
this.
sage.
Yeah, I could only hope to impart other people's better info to people that I like who are doing things that I think are cool. But yeah, I think that's, like we were talking about portfolio reviews. That's like one of the biggest things, you're talking about collaboration. And I like going to portfolio reviews and learning from people who are way better at my craft than I am, because you sit down with them. Like, I sat down with Steve Epting, who had a really amazing run on Captain America and did the Civil War run for Marvel. And he would look at the stuff and he's like, you can do this. Like, you just turn this like about 13, 15 degrees this way, or like rotate the characters this way because you need to like follow the 180 rule. So in talking to somebody who's seasoned experience that you respect and admire, they can give you so much more insight into what you're doing. And for you doing a film where you collaborate with other creators and other actors or
Right.
whatever,
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
they're more seasoned than you are. They see things that you don't see, or they know things that you don't know. You get incredible takeaways from projects like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I definitely did. It was after that, I took a course in film, like a short course, actually, when I was in Japan, New York Film Academy had a course in Kyoto
Oh, wow.
on a lot where they film jidaigeki, which are like period era dramas from feudal Japan. So
Okay.
we were in this little Japanese Edo Japan former
Yeah.
capital village filming shorts. And it
No
was
way.
a 4-day course, and everything I learned, I had already learned through the course of making my film. So it was kind of, yeah, I learned by doing, but I
Yeah.
also learned the mistakes, learned by
Nice.
making mistakes, which is a really good way to learn too. So yeah,
No,
I came out of that project knowing a lot about production that I would not have otherwise known
that's
and would
fantastic.
have only learned about by taking a class. So there's
So
many ways to learn.
yeah, so you got to explore your inner Kurosawa a little bit.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And I filmed like a period piece in
Yeah,
that period setting, which was fun. I'll share that with you too. I
that's
have that up on
fantastic.
YouTube. Yeah. It was
Oh,
cool.
makes me kind of sad because I was supposed to go to Japan this year.
Oh no. If you ever do go, I went for student exchange
Okay.
and I was there for a year. And right at the tail end of that year, my Japanese got to the point where I was like, oh, I could kind of have a conversation with people and feel somewhat natural.
That's amazing.
Then I did an internship. So that was in Hiroshima. Then I spent
Okay.
time in Matsuyama, which has the hot spring that they based the Spirited Away hot
Ah,
spring on in Dogo
wow.
Onsen in
Yeah.
Matsuyama, Japan, which is my favorite city out of all of I've traveled much more in Japan than I have done in the US. And Matsuyama is by far my favorite place in general. And then I went back and taught English in a very rural area in Kochi through the JET program for a year. So
Okay.
total, I lived in Japan for 2 years, and then I came back and started working for Japanese companies.
Oh, that's
Um,
fantastic.
yeah.
Do you find that Japanese people appreciate it when you are trying to learn the language and follow the customs? Like they see that
Yes.
as a positive.
Yeah, I think so. When I was at the university, it was difficult because everybody was taking English courses and wanted to practice their English.
Yeah.
And my Japanese was so poor at that time that I couldn't posture myself as having enough Japanese to hold a conversation.
Yeah.
And so to communicate, they would naturally start speaking English with me, even if I didn't really want to speak English. So there's kind of that tipping point where your
Okay.
language ability gets to a point where you could overpower the other person's
Yeah.
proficiency in your own native language. So that was like a tipping point that was frustrating to overcome, in terms of everyday communication at the
Yeah.
university. But when I lived in the rural area, this was an area that was so rural. People from Tokyo who came to visit me would say, yeah, I don't really know what people around here are saying because their dialect is so strong.
Oh, wow.
So those local people appreciated that I could at least speak and communicate in Japanese, in general, because
Yeah.
they couldn't speak a lick of English.
What a great life experience to have.
Yeah. No, I wouldn't. It totally, speaking Japanese, I could confidently say has totally changed the trajectory of my life and impacted the trajectory of my life in a very positive way. There's nothing like being able to communicate in a foreign language and the nuanced insight that provides, because, there's things that I want to communicate in English that I could say in Japanese, but I can't really find the words for in English, and vice versa. I don't know.
That definitely does
Do you
happen.
speak Vietnamese
I
at
speak
all, or
I speak
any other
Vietnamese, and
language?
it's the same. We have various words for like one thing, but each has like a slightly different meaning, and then there's no equivalent, phrase or word in English, and then vice versa. There's just things you can't communicate, and so you just end up saying whatever the English word is for it to a Vietnamese person, because they're just like, I don't know what else to call this. Like, what would you call the internet? The internet.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
If there's 5 words to say something, but in the other language, you only have one way to say it, at some point you're losing nuance. Yeah. So that's a really valuable thing, not just from the perspective of speaking the language, but understanding perspective, and that people could see something totally different. If you look at the internet and you don't see nuance, but somebody has 8 different words for the internet, they see more nuance than you, just by virtue of their cultural perspective on it.
Yeah. Very cool. So I have to ask.
Yeah.
Have you found good Japanese food in North Carolina?
Surprisingly, there was one spot that we got pretty good sashimi at, actually.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, and I'm 2 hours from the coast, so and I'm not saying that shop was selling coast fished fresh fish. It's a lot of F's. But yeah, it was actually pretty good.
That's
but
awesome.
that was 1 out of 5 or so.
Okay.
Yeah. And you're in California, so I imagine you eat.
We're spoiled. Yeah.
Yeah. Good sushi all the time.
Little Osaka and Little Tokyo. And then, there's just Japanese, Hawaiian communities everywhere. There's Asian food. Hate on LA and Southern California as much as anybody you want to, but the thing that I cannot deny is whatever you want to find in terms of food, probably have it here in LA. And super authentic. If not, for example, Vietnamese food, one of the largest Vietnamese communities, Orange County. You just go down there.
Oh, really? I don't think I knew that.
The other biggest community is San Jose, I believe, which is Northern California. So,
so within the state, you probably have 50% or so.
Yeah. So there's just speaking of, the melting pot idea, I'm lucky to be where I'm at. It really is diverse, and you really get to see different cultures and interact with different people. And, it's heartwarming when people want to show you their culture and like bring it to you. And I think that's, a fantastic thing. Like Ethiopian food, like I didn't know what Ethiopian food was until I moved to LA, and there's Little Ethiopia is a really popular spot out here in LA, and the food is fantastic. Their vegetarian stuff is the best. if you're gonna try Ethiopian food, I highly recommend sticking to the vegetarian stuff. That's probably my favorite stuff, and they have really good baked fish.
Do they do lamb
I think they do lamb,
too? Okay.
but what some of the best stuff is they do an injera bread, which is a fermented bread, and it looks like a giant elephant ear, and then they put that on a table, and then they just set the food, which is very similar to curries.
I was gonna say, is it something akin to a naan?
Yeah, it's the bread itself is not like a naan. It's very spongy. It's like rice cakes. Like they have the spongy rice cake desserts. If you have like dim sum, I think some Japanese buns. It's kind of like that texture, like
I
a
think
bao
I know what you
almost.
mean. Yeah.
But it's fermented, so it's like a sourdough, puffy, spongy bread.
And
then
it's
they put
moister than a bao?
yeah,
Yeah.
and then it's akin to what like curries are, and they put that on top of it.
That sounds really good. Yeah,
Yeah.
I was supposed to get Ethiopian food one time in New York, but something happened and it never happened. So
I recommend trying it.
I have to
It's
go out to LA, I guess,
yeah,
to get
it's an
to get the good
experience.
stuff.
Once I guess places are back up and running, and we also have their vegetarian stuff is really fantastic. I live in this area that's known as like Black Beverly Hills, which is View Park, Leimert Park area, and they just opened up a Ethiopian vegetarian restaurant, and it's fantastic. So yeah, can't recommend it enough.
Nice. You heard it here first or second or third. Ethiopian food is where it's at.
Yeah, I could talk about food all day. I just it's one of those
So,
things.
have you lived anywhere besides Washington, like Seattle area, you said, or California? Have you lived on the East Coast at all?
No, I've always been a West Coast person. So grew up between Seattle and LA, and that's pretty much it. And I haven't really traveled much. I've gone to like Antigua is probably the farthest out. Canada really was just an extension of Washington.
So why Japan, and how Japan? Like,
Always wanted to visit Japan and always wanted to go to Studio Ghibli, and we had planned a vacation there. And then the pandemic hit. Like, we started seeing news in China. We're like, can't go to Asia.
oh no, what month? When were you supposed to go?
We were supposed to be there in March, and then we switched, and we were like, well, why don't we put Japan off for like another year until this is over, which I don't know where that's going, and do Ireland. And so we were scheduled to be in Ireland for St. Patty's Day. And when the Irish canceled St. Patty, we were like, oh, this is
real.
not good.
This is legit.
Yeah.
Oh man. Yeah, when you do get to Japan, feel free to reach out and let me know. I'd love to give you recommendations.
Yeah, that would be amazing, man. Thank you so much. Appreciate
What
it.
were you what were you planning on, like a 10-day or
Yeah,
a week or 2 weeks, or?
we had gone a tour package, which I think is a 10-day trip, and then it would just go through like Kyoto. There was like a stay in Tokyo. You'd visit some temples, and you get like free time to like roam and explore the cities and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
I
can
don't remember the
recommend,
exact-
like a friend of mine has a bar restaurant, more on the bar end, kind of like a izakaya,
Ooh.
in Tokyo and Ebisu.
Okay.
Yeah, shout out
Oh.
to Brock and Coley.
I will definitely have to reach
Yeah,
out. 'Cause I
it's
would
really
love-
good.
love
And
to
I'll
see
let
that.
him know you're coming.
Yeah.
He loves having international guests.
But yeah, my wife and I just love Japanese food, love the culture, love all the cute stuff, especially.
There's no avoiding it.
There's
You
no
don't even
avoiding
have to look.
and now I feel like I would be a little bit more welcome because I just did my sketch card set for Marvel anime. So
Is there any way, have you ever investigated doing a con out over there? A Comic-Con out over there? Is there?
yeah, they have a huge convention. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it occurs. I forgot what it's called, but it occurs in like this giant convention center that's a multiplex, and it's like all manga and anime.
Okay. And they parlay comics into that?
Yeah, and I guess that's where all I can't even pronounce it. Mangeki, the people who make mangaka,
Yeah.
go and sell their wares and stuff, which is amazing. But I think whenever we were supposed to arrive, it would have been right after that event. And yeah, from what I understand, it's like one of the largest convention scenes like in the world.
Yeah, the term for Japanese independent creators is escaping me right now, but I always wanted to investigate. I'm not sure if there's room for them at that big convention or not.
Yeah,
So
I
some
think
research required on my part.
Yeah, I think it is a mixture of everybody though, because from what I understand, it's like multi-day and like 3 stories maybe. Like it's multi-storied, and
Oh,
I've
okay.
seen pictures of the crowd. I was like, oh, I think that crowd's way larger than San Diego.
I think when I looked it up, I just assumed that it was just cosplay, anime, and manga,
Yeah.
and I didn't realize that they included Western comics as well.
Oh, I don't think they include Western comics.
Oh no,
No,
okay,
no, no. Yeah, yeah.
but not even Marvel and
I think
the
if it
bigger
is,
players.
it's in the like Marvel anime manga format, but it's not Western style.
Got it.
Yeah.
How do you feel about manga's influence on contemporary comics?
Are you talking about artistically, like style?
Artistically,
I
yeah,
think it's
style wise.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Like one of my favorite artists is Jim Adwera. He definitely dives into that style, and I made friends with, for example, Ray Anthony Height. His style is heavily influenced. He's a huge anime manga fan. There's a lot of crossover, and a lot of stories are being told, and it's just one of those things where there's so many great stories, and they're so unfamiliar to Western audiences, and I feel like I don't have enough time to explore them all. Like
Yeah, especially because manga gets into like a lot of everyday life minutia, like
yeah,
manga about every sort of chef you could imagine with a very specific culinary skill set,
a
or
slice of life.
slice of life. But
And,
getting into it so deep that it no longer is a slice of life, but like
I
so
mean,
specialized. I think
what
that's
is
the beauty of it.
the basketball comic that's been around
Slam
forever?
dunk.
Yeah, Slam Dunk.
Yeah,
That's how old is that now? It's like 30 years old.
I think it's 80s. Yeah.
Yeah.
One of my favorites is Hajime no Ippo. It's a boxing manga, and I'm pretty sure it's still going on. And at some point, it was like the Simpsons of manga. It was the longest running and had over.
Wow.
I don't want to misspeak, but people could
Yeah,
look up
yeah.
how many issues it has out
I
in
honestly
collected volumes.
know nothing. So if anybody wants to teach me anything, I'm more than happy to learn.
I would highly recommend. And Hajime no Ippo also has anime, which is I would
Yeah.
highly recommend. Yeah.
Yeah, my nephew is really into Naruto, so he started to learn Japanese in high school just so he could read the manga. Because I think he was like, the shows are like so far behind, and if I just read it, I'll be totally caught up. I was like, oh, okay, totally makes
That's
sense.
that's how me and my brother and my friends got into it. We lived in
Yeah.
the suburbs, would go to Chinatown in New York City, go into these caves underground where they were selling bootleg copies of subtitled Dragon Ball Z,
Nice.
Dragon Ball, and
Yeah.
Dragon Ball GT tapes for $5 a pop, so you could see what wasn't yet being broadcast. It was like revelatory.
Ingenuity.
Yeah, and it spawned some of my interest in Japanese culture and language. But speaking about manga, when I was in Hiroshima and I was challenged by the fact that I couldn't speak Japanese enough to overcome English speaking Japanese folks, so I was really not able to practice as much as I wanted to.
Yeah.
Manga is part of what put me over that tipping point and got me to the point where I could speak colloquially with
Wow.
with folks. Yeah, because
Yeah.
manga is written in a conversational way, whereas what you're learning in school is more formal.
Yeah.
So it really helped me and my communication skills in Japanese.
Oh, that's fantastic. Actually, my nephew told me that too, and I was like, oh,
Did it?
I don't know what you're saying, but go ahead and practice it with
Yeah.
sushi
I mean,
shop.
it's like we don't really have formal English that's so different that it's hard to recognize. um, from a conversational perspective, but Japanese is different enough that, you know, you would be speaking formally to somebody who just wants to have a conversation.
Yeah.
It makes it difficult.
Yeah, Vietnamese is the same way. There's a structure and hierarchy to who you address.
Yeah, exactly.
Based on, their elder status, if you will.
And maybe it's the same as Japanese. You can, through your speech, raise somebody up and make that with honorifics, or you could lower yourself. So there's two modes of leveling off that hierarchy where it should be.
Yeah, it's very similar to go at, hey, uncle, or hey, guy.
Yeah. Or, hey, uncle, and I'm a shitty person. Please look at me and allow me audience with you, something like that.
And that's understandable because, the royalty structure, if you will, in terms of the empire, I could see definitely, the feudal system that they had.
Yeah, class structure in feudal society. So that's another hurdle to overcome if you're learning Japanese.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
I think we covered everything. You want to, before we go, a parting word about and it doesn't have to be long. It could be as long as you want it to be, but about your next project. Personally, your personal projects, your indie projects, and anything that you're involved in for other companies.
Right now it's just kind of wild. Like I said, there are 3 live Kickstarters that I'm a part of. So Danger Arcade with the Sketchy Bugs and the Comic Bug, it ends tomorrow at 8 a.m. And then Nightmare Theater, which is being done by Clay Adams and Dave Schrader. They've collected an amazing team of creators. David Pepos, that I mentioned before, is on it. David Avalone. There's a lot of Davids on this project. David Avalone, who does Betty Page comics and Elvira comics for IDW's on it. Carly Gadecki, who does Duplicate, and she's a screenwriter, is on it. Rylan Grant, who's also a screenwriter, does an amazing comic called Banjax and Aberration, and is also running a Kickstarter right now, is in that one. And then Cthulhu Invades Oz is another live Kickstarter, and all 3 of those projects are all Kickstarter projects we love. So I don't know what the chances of being in that many Kickstarters and all
at
being
a given time.
It's pretty phenomenal. And then I'm working on a few independent projects, including Pablo the Girl Number 2. I'm trying to write that. But in the meantime, I am penciling something with Michael Tanner, who's the writer and co-creator of Junior Braves of the Apocalypse from Oni Press. We're working on a project together. I am working with my friend Aaron Lindenthaler. We did a short film together. I originally did some storyboards for him for a project called Retro. He took that and made it into a motion comic. We debuted at the Dances with Films Festival out at the Man Chinese Hollywood, the TCL, I guess, Chinese Hollywood Theater last year, and we're turning that into a comic. So yeah, there's a lot of things on the plate. Hopefully 2021 will be good and carry more projects, and you'll see more of me. But so far 2020, as unfortunate as it has been, it's probably been my most published year with like the most work available. And then the Marvel anime cards are currently out. Peach Momoko is the headline artist. I don't know if you're familiar with her work, but I think she did most of the cards in the deck, and she has about 100 sketch cards that she did for it. And I have probably one of the rare sets. I only did 10 cards for them. So keep an eye out. I heard the packs are really hard to find.
So yours are going to be real collector items.
Yeah, they haven't made it stateside yet, but somebody reported in Japan that they found Venom. So they found my Venom card. And then somebody somewhere found my Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur card. So those 2 cards are off the boards.
Awesome. Yeah. Very cool. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Don.
Thank you so much for
I would love to have you on again anytime you want to chat, long form and kind of all over the place. But, your projects are really awesome. I'm excited to support them and look forward to Pablo the Gorilla number 2 and also number 1, which I think I saw I might be able to cop on Etsy.
Yeah, you can pick up number 1 through Etsy. My store is just look for Winning It on Etsy and it should pop up. Number 1 is there. There's going to be a 2-pager that will be coming in Ed Dukeshire's digital webbing collection. he said he was doing it in the fall, and we're heading into the winter, so I don't know when he's releasing it. But he's busy, obviously, as he's doing lettering for Boom Comics and for our book as well. So keep an eye out for that. And then I hope to have Pablo #2 done soon. And then you'll see that on Kickstarter too eventually.
Awesome. Yeah. Definitely ping me when it goes live, and we could have another conversation if you like. If not, I'll definitely alert the people on social media that it's out, and maybe repost this conversation too. So thanks again for joining me, and have a great day, evening, afternoon, night. What time is it now?
It's 5 Pacific,
5.
so I imagine it's 8 o'clock your time.
So enjoy some good Ethiopian food.
Yeah, they've been doing takeout, so thankfully we can just go and pick it up and bring it back home and not have to worry about anything. But yeah, if you're ever out this way, we should go grab some food, even if it's just for takeout.
Yeah, absolutely. And let me know. I'll definitely be looking for the Charlotte Comic-Con, but if you're ever out this way in North Carolina or the East Coast in general, I float around with work a little bit, so there's a chance we could connect.
Fantastic. Yeah, look out for Heroes Con. I think Heroes Con was supposed to be, I want to say in June of this year, like May or June-ish. So I think it's slated for the same time period next year.
Awesome. And I'll reach out to you after I hang up and get anything you want included in the show notes and on social media. Until then, thanks for sharing your random.
All right. Thank you very much for having me on. Appreciate it.
Have a good one.
You too.